Hi everyone, welcome to the Debate Club. So my name is Raghav, and I'm going to be the host today. So the Debate Club is a organization that is, trying to foster an intellectually active ecosystem in India. We are trying to create a space where everybody can come in and have engaging intellectual conversations with people who potentially disagree or agree with them. So the whole idea is to create a space where nuanced conversations can happen and we can all engage with each other. So we started in November 2023, and it's been over a year and a half. You mean more than a year now, and we've successfully conducted these kind of debates every week for the past year, more than 14 months now, and so the topic of today's session is non-critical public sectors should be privatized for better efficiency. Agree or disagree? So, to provide some context on this, you may probably be aware of the impression that if the government is doing something, the expectations ought to be very low. This is like not just in India, like around the world. You have this impression that if a government is undertaking something, the expectations are typically low. It's only when the private entity is starting to do something, then you have like high expectations for efficiency and pace or anything. So the concept is that, like, should we privatize all non-critical public sectors for better efficiency, or do you see any problems with that? So just to summarize, like, some pros and cons. um, so for the pros, like, you can say that it would lead to increased efficiency, because we've seen this, like, anytime, even if you have initiatives like there is BOT, build, operate, and transfer. These kind of like initiatives have been undertaken in the past, where like a private entity will build something, even if it's a public infrastructure, and then they will operate for a little bit, and then they'll transfer it over to the government. And these kind of measures were like very attractive because of the efficiency, and high quality of output. And also innovation. Private entities are typically known for better innovation. They have, like, usually government doesn't incentivize innovators to come into the space enough. They usually, the salaries are kind of low, but the private sector, like, they have higher salaries, so the innovation is like higher, and cost reduction as well, because like government projects take forever to complete, and healthy competition, and also fiscal relief, because like government, it takes if you have like private entities taking up the execution of something, there is not enough like pressure on the government to create the revenue system and all that stuff. So if a private entity takes it up, it's often maybe more efficient. But kind of boils down to efficiency for all of these things. But there are some points against this. Like, if a private entity is like taking on certain sectors, there is a possibility that there is a loss of public control. As in, the private entity could create the public infrastructure in such a way that it is it is private. It is like boosting its own profits, or maybe like it's creating a certain incentive structure in the market that is favorable to the private entity and not for the public. And there is potential for monopolies, and also negative impact on public services, and potentially job losses as well, because the government does employ a lot of people. So there are all of these like pros and cons. And with all this context set, now the floor is open. So if you want to pitch in, all you have to do is, like, at the bottom there is a react button. If you click on that, there is a raise hand. You can raise your hand, and then you can take up to 5 minutes to establish your point of view. And after that, whoever else is raising hand next would take their turn and state their points. So, who would like to go first? Yeah, Mukul, go ahead.
All right. So as the topic says that should public sectors, I guess, be privatized or not, like non-critical public sectors, right?
Yes.
So in my opinion, I would say that they should be privatized, And because the progress that we make or the development that we can have is only like can be done by privatization only. Why? Because with privatization, you can have lots of competition, which is like a really good thing that you can see in like major sectors like in telecommunication. There is competition like for the prices or in the internet and all of that. Like so, when there is competition, there will be like the companies will be competing for the price and for the services that they provide. So in my opinion, yeah, they should be privatized. But there's an issue, as you have mentioned, that there's an issue of doing kind of a monopoly, right? Uh, like doing things for their own profits only. But if we see like in other countries, I'm actually to be honest, I'm not that much experienced with this topic, but I'll just only say the much I know. So if we which are developed, for example, the Norway or all these countries, like in Europe, I think they have privatized and like most of the sectors. And in some countries, like there is privatization in uh, critical public sectors as well. So these actually, I think, really like are helpful in developing economies like India. And so yeah, and also in China, we see like there are a lot of companies like they like the Chinese government like gave the I don't know those are called tenders or whatever to those companies like which are based in their country only. I'm not saying that should be like in order to regulate those things like looking for a profit only. I think what government can do is like China, they only allow the companies that are based in their own country, like in China, to compete and do the business. So yeah, that's my point, and think that way it would be regulated, and I think that would be better.
Right. You know what? Let me take a step back and reestablish the context a little bit better. See, it's not just about like getting private contractors and stuff like that. That stuff happens anyways. So when we say like privatization of non-critical public sectors, we're talking about like various aspects of public infrastructure. Like for example, law enforcement is a public like like the government takes care of this. For example, there is a huge like for example you know um what else is handled publicly, like the judicial system is obviously like the government, you know is there's no private like court or something that has merit. There are other sectors, like several other sectors that are purely public, right? For example, the corporation, the municipality, these are all like publicly handled. But when we say non-critical, so for example, law enforcement is critical, national security is critical. These are not things that you would give it to a private army or something, you know so what are the what if like we just had only these critical ones which are handled by the government, the rest of it is all handled by private sector? That is what we are talking about here. Private contractors will be like, they're given contracts everywhere in the world. Even in India, we do offer tenders and give these business to private entities. And if, for example, if you look at the auctioning of the telecommunications, that's all done by private sector, right? So these things happen anyway. These things are happening right now. But what we are talking about right now is how do we? Is there a way to like minimize the burden on the government for a lot of other things that are handled by the solely by the government currently? I hope that makes sense. I think Jubin, you had your hand up.
Yes, yeah, my opinion would be, as you have mentioned earlier, except for the very critical government like organizations or things like law enforcement and military,
Mm.
most of the things should be privatized. Because when was the last time you saw that government is doing something efficient than a private company in terms of business? I mean, it's true like everywhere in the world, even from US to China, to Western countries to India. Government cannot do business. That's a fact because they have their limitations. Because the primary reason why people want government jobs, if you ask a common man, why do you want a government job? Especially people who are government aspirants are wasting a good part of their lives just to write exams, with questions like who built Taj Mahal, or you know. Which is the largest peak in the world, just to
Mm.
study something really not necessary, that is not going to help with their skills, and competing with each other just to ruin their youth. What is their expectation? If you ask them, they'll say, okay, if I get a government job, no one will take me out, like no one will be able to suspend me or dismiss me. I don't have to do the job, they'll give me salary. That's the so-called job security you have in government. So when you uh, are pressurizing such people to go, not pressurizing, when you are expecting such people to be in a government sector, how can you expect that the government will be run in efficiency? Because even if you do a job, let's say if you're a salesman, if you are doing 10 sales a month, you get a fixed commission. If you're doing 100 sales a month, you get a better commission. But in the government, I think then the common notion is that the person who is doing the work is the stupid guy. Because even if you don't do the work, you'll get the same salary, right? So why would you do the work anyway? That's not happening in the private sector, and it's based on efficiency and the performance delivery. So so when such people are already in the government, I don't really know how a government agency or a government system would be performing better than a private agency. So every sector where government is involved, I think, would be underperforming than a private counterpart. So in every sector except for the public good, like the military, for example, or security forces, judiciary, police, like maybe some sort of schemes for poor people. Except for all these things, I think most of the sectors should be privatized, because government itself cannot do business. They are just there to create jobs. So even if there is a entity that needs only maybe 10 people to be really good at their job, the government may employ maybe 50 people or 60 people just to fill the gaps. I know personally there are, I'm basically from southern state, so there are drivers in the southern state, like in a corporation, who earns more than 1.5 lakhs a month just because of they are in the government sector. I mean, I'm not saying that driver being a driver is not is a bad job, but the problem is when such expenses are incurred in a government in a system, it's not good. So either they have to be given more responsibility, such that that level of money is justified, or they should be given less amount of money for the same job. So when such people are involved in such entities, I don't really know understand how it can be more efficient. As far as I know, I don't know a single government organization or a single business that's run by the government across the world, I'm saying, that is performing better than the private counterpart. I don't know which one, maybe BSNL or bus corporations that we have in every state. Every state bus corporation is under debt. Or maybe, I don't know, the ambassador car. I think everyone must be aware of the ambassador car policy that Indian government had, that we are not supposed to import any other cars. We are only supposed to use ambassador cars for a very long time, and the how that affected Indian economy in general, how it pulled back our progress for decades. So all these policies and so-called visions by the government, I don't think will support the growth of the economy in the long term. They are just maybe to please some voters or some people who are in general in need of jobs, just to show that. And most of the times, what happens with the gun? There's a concept called digging the hole and like covering the hole. So just the government just digs a hole. Okay, now there is a now they think that okay, there is a job to cover the hole. So the digging of the hole and covering of the hole is done by the government just to show that there are jobs that are available and they should be needing it. And also, most of the people who prefer government jobs prefer comfort rather than performance. So in that scenario, why would they work? That's the main question, right? Why should I work? Either I have to be punished if I'm not working, or I have to be incentivized. So in a government job, none of these things matter. You won't be punished also, you won't be incentivized also. So why would you work in the first place? I don't think
Right.
the passion matters in a government job. You just have to need to do something that's not that uh, crazy or not that adventurous. Adventures or innovation is really frowned upon in government jobs as well. As we all know, the last week we had like a tremendous debate about DeepSeek and ChatGPT and what did come from India. So obviously, where 90% of population prefers India, even our parents prefer like government jobs sometimes. I think when I used to, even when I said this fact that okay, I got a private job maybe at the start of my career, most of my family members, because I was the oldest grandson in my family, most of the family members were like, but can't you write some government exams and get into a government job? Because it has better job security, it has better prospects in the marriage market. So all these real what do you say environment shows that people are generally not interested in privatization at all in India, and uh, being a government employee maybe curbs that drive for innovation. So obviously, so my point is that unless we privatize most of the sectors of the government, the economy cannot flourish and it cannot move forward, because there has to be uh, what do you say authority, not authority, there has to be a audit or something like what, for example, those who work in the private sector knows that at the end of every year you have a performance review, right, an appraisal to evaluate your performance in the last year. So that generally doesn't happen in the government sectors. So that's also a reason why maybe it happens at the authority level, but that's not really beneficial to the common people or how they are viewing the output. We know
Okay.
personally like how much time they are taking to build a bridge or whatever it is. So obviously, I think that needs to be. It's high time we did that. Handed most of the responsibilities to the private sectors and take the burden of the government.
Okay. Thanks, Jibin. I mean, the only exception to that, whatever you said, is that ISRO is a government entity and it's doing. It seems to be doing well. Um, I have seen a few instances of like people being underpaid and or not getting paid on time when it comes to like public research institutions and stuff. But otherwise, the output is like pretty commendable. But yeah, but that's an exception, not the norm.
Can I respond to that or
Sure,
like?
sure. Maybe
Yeah,
just
but
briefly.
yeah, sure. I think government is just limiting innovation by just putting in the government sectors, because they can maybe create private jobs in other private organization as well, which would, if like as an example, if there are private entities with the same intentions like research centers, they would do maybe 10 times better than the government entities, because they'll be getting paid well and based on the performance they'll be incentivized more. So I think government has to put more effort in private implementation as well. Just don't limit themselves to being government employees.
No, yeah, that's happening. I mean, there's been a huge effort to privatize the space sector. There's a lot of private companies that are launching rockets these days. Even ISRO has its own support program for private space agencies. Anyway, that's happening. Yeah. So, Jagroshan, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hello guys, hello Raghav.
Hey.
Yeah, so yeah, you asked me initially also. So it's not my first time. I used to be in a couple of I attended couple of debates also. So I just so Raghav, sorry, whether you put this ISRO in critical public sector or non-critical?
I mean, that's up for debate. I would say it's non-critical because like when we define critical, right, we're talking
Okay.
about things that are essential. For example, social security or national security
Mm.
or law enforcement. So law enforcement does come under like some kind of you're trying to like bring a certain level of order and stability to the society, right? So when we say critical, we are talking about those kind of things that are essential for base level
Functioning
order.
of a country,
Yeah, like the functioning of a country. So
correct.
anything beyond that is non-critical. I mean, if you manage to like run the country and if just feed everybody, and there is no you're protecting from foreign invasions, or like you're protecting from terrorisms, all these things, these are, if you can do all of these things, then it is at base level, as in we may not be progressing, but we're able to sustain ourselves. So that would constitute as like, at least for according to my definition. I don't think there's like an authority to establish this, but this is just my view about what is critical, what is not critical.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. So yeah, so let's me continue here. So I will go with the very basics, What's the difference between this public sector and private sector? So it's all boils down to one is not for profit, and another one is for profit. Basically, they are there, otherwise they doesn't make sense. And it's when we see in this manner, it going to make sense why things happen. All this issue of salary, or the zeal that uh, private organization have this. They have this speed, they have this whatever. Why the reason? But since I'm looking that the people are quite I am supposed to go with the you know public sector, but I will take the back step and go with this. What's the downside and disadvantages of you know privatization? So I would like to go with that. So the problem with the privatization, and I will go with the examples like the case of Boeing. You know what happened? Uh, because there is a concept of PR, image, and that kind of kills that kind of a driver also, and that becomes a, you can say, boon or ban both at the time of the situation, because they really care about this PR thing. And when I make the whatever this 737 Max crashes happened, because the reason, if you guys know, or if you because they have done something without telling the companies the design changes and all of that, and which leads to crashes because of the PR issue ultimately. Because if they conveyed it, they have to go through this cost, when I started with this profit and non-profit, because boils down to cost, they have to go with the cost and all it. So to not affect to not what I say, to lower their prices and to not become it make it expensive, they have done whatever they have done, and this leads to crashes of and loss of lives and whatever happens. So yeah, I really like to question this, like how you're going to tackle this situation of this, profit making and kind of the PR issue that comes with these private sectors, and they are dependent on that, right? Another example that I would like to go with this quite age-old example of this Bhopal gas tragedy that happened. It was a this I don't remember the Mike, that chemical name, but I don't remember the company's name. It is also private company, kind of, and this same thing, profit making. They don't go into their safety equipments and all, which leads to this disaster. And the problem we are facing in today's world with this privatization, uh, very basic example, very relatable example, this companies like Google, Microsoft, Apple kind of being monopolized, like they are monopolized, and they are ruling our lives in crazy manner, that they are literally in the way they are functioning even greater than the government, greater than the GDPs of a company. and there I can see there are benefits of privatization, as all of you have mentioned. I literally feel, quite of whatever Jubin said, quite relatable about that, government thing, the problems with that. But if we don't tackle this, I really like to discuss like how we are going to solve this problem of privatizing this, because ultimately there are pros and cons of both sides. But if anybody like to answer this thing, and I'll appreciate. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just to add a comment on this, like, see, when it comes to, there are, like, stories like the Boeing stuff and all that, but if you look at regulation of the private sector as they engage in these non-critical sectors itself as a critical aspect, right? That is something that the government can handle, and if that is happening properly, then we can make this work. I don't think that you have to it has to be like a binary one or the other kind of thing. It can be something that can be combination of using the private sector and then having public oversight onto that. But yeah, I think Mukul, you had your hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you for letting me speak again. All right, so I won't take a lot of time, but I would say that I do appreciate Jug Roshan's perspective on this, and I think he put up some good points about the disadvantages of privatizing these sectors. Okay, um, I do agree, but as we see that competition is needed. But if we do the same thing that everyone has done, then we will achieve the same result, in my opinion. What do I mean by that? We are doing should we privatize or should we not privatize? Should we government should handle all these? Why shouldn't we open our mind and think outside the box? For example, let's take railway. If railway has been privatized, our Indian Railway, then the prices for the passenger, the cost, they the companies would have increased the price a lot, and it could have become unaffordable for the common people if the railway has been privatized. But as it was not, so the it is still pretty much affordable, and although services are not that much par, but they are there. So it is not really a bad thing. The only thing that comes with government controlling all this is, I think, the competition, because there's no competition, there's no drive to innovate and to like I'm not getting the word, upgrade the things, all of that. So I think we should focus more on that part, like getting the drive out, and because and also the privatization. What privatization does is, if you see Geo and this Airtel and all of these, we had some plans for the common people, like they could recharge with 150, right? Even of 10, 12 rupees. Where are they now? We don't have those recharges anymore. And everyone has to, whether it's a poor person who's not able to afford, he has to pay 100 plus amount of money, or even 200, even 300 for the basic calls that I've seen. So that is really that has become a monopoly. They haven't, and these companies have increased their prices substantially all of a sudden, and we can't do anything. And if it has been like a government entity, just like railway, that wouldn't have happened. And now there are a lot of people who are not able to get the recharges and all of that. So, in my opinion, I think we should think outside of the box and not just follow privatization or non-privatized government. I think we should make our government competent, something like that, so that our government is able to do such things instead of just privatizing everything. Because as Jagroshan mentioned, that Microsoft, Google, and all of those, are there, and if they stop providing us services, and then we will be in a really huge loss. So yeah, I think that is my opinion. Thank you.
Just a comment on what you said about the Indian Railways thing, right? See, or the Geo, all these things. One of the things is that when Geo or Airtel, when they first start these programs, right, they are offering massive subsidies. See, there is an operational cost. Any business, there is an operational cost, and the job of the business is to like recover those expenses through the pricing. But in order to do customer acquisition, they will offer subsidies to those costs. And after a certain point of reaching the threshold customer acquisition, they will basically disengage those subsidies, which will bring those prices on par so that like they can recover the costs with a margin on top, so that they can invest that into the expansion of the business. So it's not that they increase the prices rapidly or something. It's that they started off operating it much in a very subsidized manner. That's why they had to bring it up to par. It's not like they 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 started off at reasonable and then like went unreasonable. So that's one point. And the other thing is like with the Indian Railways also, like we are paying with our tax money to subsidize those tickets. So Indian Railways is like operating at like some, I think the 60% loss or something like that. I don't know the exact figure, but they're operating at a 60% loss at any given time, and we are bearing the burden of that with our tax money. So that's just a point to keep in mind. But yeah, Jagroshan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to go with the same thing about the Indian Railway. So, uh, you know, uh, like even if you're not traveling, you're kind of paying the price of that Indian Railway, because that 57%, whatever they mentioned, 57% is bared by this our taxpayers' money. So even if you have never traveled on Indian Railway, or if you have traveled just once a year, twice a year, you are literally paying the money in the form of you can say petrol, in the form of vegetables or whatever you buy, daily stuffs. So yeah, that's really quite a good. I don't know about what the Mughul's reaction is going to be there on this part. I like to address this thing about this government and private thing. I think I think it started with Jubin mentioned that the problem with this mentality and attitude, I can say, uh, you know, people apply for the job, government jobs. They have this attitude, or if you can say parents also, of the job security first, and second, that they don't have to work that much hard. And I am saying this with my personal experience. My father is a government personnel, and he expected me to, because of these two reasons, job security and there is no hard work. Because in their perspective, in their mind, it is there, and I think it's in everybody's mind. That's why it's there. So I think the thing that need to be addressed is this mentality, right? Someone do done the, like, when people applied for government job and if people applying for a private job, that government job guy, that who is applicant of government job guy, do much hard work initially, but later when they enter the job, they became, quite of because of this attitude, this approach, this mentality, that okay, now it's done for my life. But for a private sector, it's like the real struggle begins, because they have to update itself with that current cutting edge, knowledge, so that they can stay there. And that comes in the form of, you can say, and someone mentioned that they don't get good salary government. I don't relate with this fact, because it's not about that they looking in the context of that CTC, right? But you're not looking in the context of the services that they get government quarters, they get subsidized food, subsidized for a military personnel, whether we are not taking into account, but still I am giving example, the CSD canteens and all, they get foods and basically transports and all. But for private sector, for that CTC, they have to pay the rent of their home, electricity, their data, their everything, literally everything. So the savings that a government personnel do and the private personnel do is up. It's become a switch, like it's switched, right? The savings they do, like they can save 90% of their salary, a government person, but a private person, they can hardly save 10 to 20% of their salary at the end of the month. Yeah, so that's me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Jubin, please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't remember who said those points about the Boeing. I think it was, yeah, I don't remember the name. So the thing is, if I wanted to remind on that point first, because those incidents, like the Union Carbide incident in Bhopal or the Boeing incident, um, those are private companies' faults. That 100% I agree. But if we say that those are private companies' faults, then we should be able to establish that government companies don't cause any failures at all, or they are foolproof, flawless. That's not possible, right? Every day, people are dying in car accidents because of the way roads are constructed. Trains are meeting with accidents. There are people who are being killed in other forms of government activities. So it's not like private are bad or private are not able to provide safety. Government are also not able to provide safety. The stampede that happened last week at Kumbh Mela, right? So all these things are there. So it's not the fault of a entity, I would say. There are possibilities of casualties and possibilities of danger everywhere. So, but I think private does it better in terms of safety than government, I would say, um, due to various policies and due to various auditing that they have to go through at each end of each year. So that's one of the points I wanted to make. Because why I wanted to say that, because if we are saying that the private incidents can happen because of private entities and their reckless behavior, then we need to establish that government don't have any accident histories, which is unfortunately not true. So I will leave that point at that. And regarding the Indian Railways, that was a point that Jogroshan said earlier. The cost cutting, the cost that's borne by the common people. So even if you're not traveling by train, you are indirectly paying for it every day. So that's not, and also I think if there is a system that, if let's say you are increasing maybe 500 rupees for a train ticket, and if there is a guarantee that you will be reaching on time, I don't think many people will be really reluctant to pay that kind of money. We know what's happening with Vande Bharat right now, right? The prices are extremely high, maybe 1,500 to 2,000 rupees, but still the trains are running like full, because people respect their time more than their money. So if I want to go to office at 9 a.m., I want the train to reach by 8 a.m., not at 11 a.m. and take a half day leave, right? So what is the guarantee that if you are traveling by the train and you'll be reaching at 9 a.m.? So most people view this as, okay, I lost 1 hour of my life. That's not the case. When a train is getting late, it's not 1 hour that's being lost. It's 1,000 hours. So 1,000 hours is being lost to the economy. People are not understanding it. So those kind of issues can only be addressed by privatization, because the government is not answerable. That's the problem. But if it's a private company, we'll put the Google reviews, or we'll just raise a complaint, or that will affect their performance, their PR work. How would you give a complaint to the Indian Railway? You have a number called 139. No one even picks it up. So yeah, so how would you complain against it? How would you Google review against government or against Indian Railways? That's not possible. So unless there is accountability, and that accountability is only possible through privatization, because even if you want a service that's good, and even if you want to hold them accountable, it has to be private. You can't hold accountable of the government. That's not possible, unfortunately. On the papers it's possible, but in real life it's not possible. Also, one of the other things that I've mentioned is I know there are some elite exams and everything, right? Like UPSC and people. I'm not saying that people who pass it are like average people. They're really intelligent people. But the problem is once they pass these exams, they are given um, some positions in some companies, maybe government companies or some public sectors that deal with very niche things like petroleum, mining, or let's say transportation, logistics, all these things. So, what is a qualification a person has who completed this UPSC? I mean, I understand that these people are really intelligent, okay, and really smart, but I don't think they are efficient to run such an organization in terms of technology or in terms of efficiency. Because maybe his background is he's a BA guy or even a BTech guy, but it won't be helping him to run a company of that sort. Let's say you are a surgeon, you are a neurosurgeon. Let's say you are very smart, very efficient, but if I ask you to cut my hair like a really pro beautician or like a really good guy who is good with his scissors, you won't be able to do it. It doesn't mean that you are not a smart guy. You are a smart guy, but you won't be able to cut my hair properly because you are not skilled in it. So that's the exact same reason that's what happening with government entities. The people may be smart, but they won't be able to run that organization because they are not well versed in it, they're not experienced in it. So just because you pass an exam doesn't mean that you get the authority to run this organization, and eventually that will be leading to those failures and more debt accumulation, and that will be affecting the overall efficiency of the government programs.
Thanks, Julian. Um, Jagroshan, please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I'm just wondering what it's all about, privatizing the non-critical public sector, organizations. But what if I add one more angle into this, whatever I mentioned about that attitude and mentality? So let's keep it non-profit, whatever it is, the same way. But what if we remove the angle of job safety in that government jobs? What if we just remove that angle? Okay, now from today onwards, there is no job safety. You are going to have your reports, whatever you do, the way you do, the hour you spend, and the whatever happens in the way we happens in private organization, same will happen going to happen in government organization. So what do you think? Does it make any impact, any change in that behavior, in that attitude, and the way it works? I don't think that timer is for me. Okay, so
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry
that's
about
the
that.
question I had, and yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jagroshan. Yeah, Mukul, please go ahead.
All right. For I think like Jagroshan has really stated a really good point. Like, what if we remove that job security part? I think that would be really great, but I think we would need to add modify other things as well, because only the job security is not the reason. There are other reasons as well. But if I like talk about the privatization, if we look at, I'm not sure if you guys have ever been to the Gurugram, the cyber city that is maintained by DLF completely. And if we look at that city, you might say, okay, that district, that DLF cyber city. So you might say, okay, this has really huge buildings, and it is actually like quite beautiful if you go there. But the basic services like the sewage and all those services like are really poorly managed, just because it is like owned by company like DLF and it is managed by DLF only. They do not care about public, like how people are living in those places. They only think about it like as a how can they make profit on everything. So that actually the DLF, the cyber city in Gurugram, it actually looks pretty good outside, but when you go inside and look like the like the sewage, all those facilities, you would be really like uh, you would say that what's going on there, and it is really like not on that like quality. I'm not getting the word, sorry. So like those are really poorly managed. So that is my question to all of you. So what do you guys think about it?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, Jubin, like, make it quick and then
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Are you sure that that sewage is handled by the private sector itself, or is it the government's responsibility to clear the sewages? Because most of the places I have seen that it's government that handles the sewage and drainage.
Uh, I would be like I'm not saying that I'm exactly sure, but the district DLF district, that cyber city is actually managed by DLF only, and I've
I think the
seen that.
sewage must be handled with the government. Generally, I mean that's a classic example of why the government can't function properly, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. I did see like somebody else raise their hand. Um, was it Saju?
It was Saju, I think.
Yeah. Do you have something to add, Saju?
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah.
I have some problems with my audio settings, but anyway, see, I want to. I think the everybody's debating on the main topic, which is um, to whether to privatize inefficient public organizations, and I'm in a like a very I'm still trying to learn this particular issue because I have seen brilliant examples of privatization of public services. But at the same time, I have seen examples wherein privatization ultimately becomes oligarchy, wherein somebody puts a border around privatization, like, for example, the telecom revolution that happened in India. There was a lot of privatization that happened in the 90 end of 90s, start of 20s, and there was a lot of competition among various players. And I still remember to this date where there used to be a huge complaint on the call. What is that called? On the call drop numbers, wherein if you are making a call to somebody and then the call drops, right? And then that is considered as a bad quality. Those figures no longer apply because the way to privatization, which is competitive bidding of the telecom bandwidth, is taken away by the current regime, which kind of pseudo it became a pseudo privatization wherein only the favorite people are given licenses, and we don't the Indian public doesn't even know now. But they don't care because the bandwidth, the digital play has come in, and everybody is on WhatsApp calls and things like that. But the call drop quality is no longer being measured, right? And there is a lot of favoritism happening in the privatization space, which means that the bandwidth, the services that we receive on telecom sector is still very low grade. So this is the problem with privatization, is that governments tend to put a boundary, like such and such people can only participate, The true free market capitalism is no longer there in anywhere in the world. You can see a good example recently what happened of DeepSeek, right? How come a Chinese company can do it at 1/10 of the cost, right? Which means the so far the people of the US were taken for a ride by many of the oligarchic companies, right? All this open AI and all those things. I believe it is a good, both are good. Like inefficiencies are not there because of lack of privatization. And on the other side, also privatization of certain things are very good. For example, the heart valves, which are used in cardiac diseases. It used to be sold for 50, 60K. Now it is available for 3, 4,000 rupees per piece, not valves, the stents. That was stents which are used in angioplasty and all. It's a very complex subject. I would say there is no single silver bullet solution to this.
Okay, thanks for that, Saju. Yeah, I think that is a valid point in terms of the perils of like privatization is that there could be some kind of corruption even there. Like for example, maybe there is a bribe that is paid to a government regulatory agency that is supposed to oversee these things, and they just manage to turn the other way when something goes wrong. This is like, again, it's a different issue in that it's an issue of corruption. It's it's when maybe like the government official who's supposed to have a say in that is not being paid well enough, or is not doing their job well enough, or the regulatory structure within the government is not sufficiently strong enough, that corruption on the private sector is corruption or like inefficiency. Because like at the end of the day, we're all human beings, whether you're working in a private sector or a government sector. Everybody's a human being, and we respond to the incentive structure within the organization. So if the private sector is like as lethargic, or the incentive for the private sector is removed, then the people in the private sector are going to behave exactly the same way that people in the government sector are currently behaving, because the incentive structure within the government is not structured in such a way that it attracts the best people, the right people with the right attitude towards the job. So I think somebody else was also saying, like, the performance review stuff and all these things are strong in the private sector. In the government, it is lacking. And if we manage to, like, maybe if you manage to hire a private think tank to restructure the entire governmental structure, where they can then begin to function at the same level of efficiency as the private sector, and then you put that on like all the critical things, right? Like for example, the law enforcement or the judiciary or public healthcare kind of situation. All of these things, if you restructure this using some kind of like a effective think tank, then it becomes much more efficient, much more leaner. I think everywhere people are preferring a leaner government, right? The government has to focus on regulating things to maintain peace and order. The base level, like, you're trying to maintain homeostasis. That's it. Then from the private sector and from the citizens in general, we sort of like invoke all the initiatives or the ideas, and all these other things, and then you can basically allow the best player in the private scene to compete and win. And obviously the government has to be very effective and efficient in terms of enforcing the law and overseeing these private entities. So that is also a critical aspect, right? Because if these private players are misbehaving, then obviously it leads to all kind of problems that would be prevalent if the government was misbehaving, right? So this is the kind of like structure that personally I feel like would make sense. But I see a couple of hands up. Jagroshan, please go ahead.
Mukul, you want to say something?
Yeah, just like I want to clear just one last thing, that is like Jubin said that in the point that I made, that cyber city, the sewage in cyber city actually managed by DLF only. So it is actually completely privatized. That is only what I wanted to say.
Okay, so yeah, am I okay? So what Raghav just mentioned about this incentive structure of this private organization. So I'd like to question this. The companies in the line of Infosys, as far as my knowledge is concerned, the incentive structure there is not great. Uh, I can see on the LinkedIn the whole day, the people keep bashing about this 3%, 5%, whatever. It's more like it become like a semi-government organization, But still people want to go there, but uh, they don't. It is not acting like a typical private, organization where the intensive in the lines of 50%, 60%, the way you perform. And I even I worked in an MNC, so I can relate, like basically in MNCs, mammoth organizations. This is quite, even they're private, but the incentive structure there is quite stagnant, quite slow paced. It's not in the line of this our what we call startups, the way startup functions is very different. So yeah, that was my point.
See, just to clarify on my point regarding the incentive structure, right? The thing is that when I was talking about that, I was saying that the most efficient private organizations win out and replace the ones that are not so efficient. Okay, this is how the private scene works. So every company has the incentive to optimize the efficiency of their internal structure. Okay, now Infosys, it doesn't mean that when I say that companies are incentivized to like optimize their internal structure, I'm not saying that every private company is doing that. Okay, there are like examples of companies that have a poor internal structure, are not as efficient, but they're still having a big role in the industry because of their monopoly. That's what happens when that company lacks the incentive to optimize internal structure. Okay, so that's just to clarify. So just because you found a private organization that had poor incentive structures doesn't mean that every company is like that too. um, I think the reason why Infosys is like doing like that is because like they are able to like leverage from the currency exchange, because all their clients are like paying a large amount of money, and they're able to pay very low to these employees, right? That's where their margin is. The margin is in currency conversion, as well as the fact that they're paying extremely low salaries and charging fairly highly to their clients. Now, imagine if like all of these other employees, all these people that the Infosys is able to employ, are having like better job offers. Let's say there are like a lot more like entrepreneurs in the society. Let's say there are a lot more companies in the society, and they're all hiring engineers, and they're competing for the talent force. Then what's going to happen is everybody's going to start offering like attractive salaries to get the best people, because like everybody knows that to run a business you need the right people, otherwise like you are not going to succeed as a business. So every entrepreneur has an incentive in getting the best possible candidate out there for themselves. So that when they realize that their edge relies on that, they will start to pay sufficiently high enough salaries. So the reason why this can happen is because of the private sector, because there are no social security measures in place in in the context of government, because the government does offer like a lot of social security for the person to actually prefer the government job. So because that these kind of like safety measures do not exist in the private space, we are able to offer the best incentives, the most excellent, and that applies not just to the individuals but also for the companies. So that's what I wanted to say. Thanks, Saju.
See, let us because this I feel there is complexity in deciding on what businesses to give to private and what businesses to keep as public. I want to state a very short opinion on how to work for it backwards. As far as I, from a citizen point of view, is concerned, I feel we should work for it, look at it from backwards. That is how the benefits are delivered, right? After all, when you talk about privatization, efficiency, what you really mean is to have the best benefit out of the cost, right? So if you are thinking in that way, then there is a failure, or there's a disconnect in within the private companies, or for the benefit of to the citizen in terms of value with respect to the price. So if suppose if there's a private restaurant, they are working, that restaurant is trying to give the best quality of food, then they are giving that best quality of food because that is worth because that quality of food is worth a lot of money to the restaurant. They provide value in those terms. And what the argument is that over a period of time, the quality of food wins over everything else, right? But for many businesses, especially restaurants and all, many a times it's not. There are other factors like the location, the vicinity, the area, in addition to the quality of food, which governs the value. So then there is a need for something like FSSAI, which will govern the quality of food and ensure that there is, so then the government is having to step in anyways, because regulation has to be done, right? And when you have a government agency regulating it, then there is nothing different from a public company and a private company, because then corruption will come in, all those things will come in. So ultimately, even if you cannot have a situation wherein there is no government at all. Even you can see TRAI, right? There is no government involvement. Assuming that there's no government, it is a very good model wherein it's self-governing and all that. But TRAI in today's terms has become toothless, right? Its proclamations doesn't have any effect on the telecom companies. Same case for any private industry, right? They are there for making money, and there's nothing wrong in it. The problem is that sometimes the private industries, they have nothing to do with the value they are delivering to the customers, right? That's the root cause. I mean, there's, ideally speaking, in a free market economy, everything should be privatized, but that is a utopia again.
Saju, I think the TRAI is a public government body, okay? Telecom Regulatory Authority of India is a government body. And just to respond to your points about regulation and stuff, so before you joined, we were talking about like what constitutes critical and what constitutes non-critical. So our definition was basically that critical means something that relates to, for example, national security or public health or social security or law enforcement, judiciary. These are the kind of things that are also like foreign policy and also regulation. Regulation is a very critical aspect, as in if you are like creating if you're creating an environment where private players are able to be corrupt and they can get away with it, that is poor regulation, right? So these are critical aspects. So overseeing private affairs and like private things and also private entities, and also uh, ensuring law enforcement, social security, foreign policy, all of these things are critical things. Anything beyond that, wherever there is like anything that goes beyond maintaining stability, that is so anything that goes beyond maintaining stability is what is extra, right? So that is where we should encourage private players to take the initiatives and drive forward. That was the whole context of the discussion. But yeah, I think next is Mukul. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Raghav, I have a question that is, so when we say non-critical, then do you also like mean by the defense, like the weapons that are manufactured in India, those are also included
See,
or excluded?
when I say maintaining national security and all that, I'm talking about the end game, as in it is your ownership. The ownership of maintaining order in the society is you. You do whatever you have to do to achieve that, but you are held accountable at the end of the day. That is what I mean. So if that involves like involving private players, I mean it's impossible to do anything large scale without involving literally everybody. Okay, that's how things work. So that's what I
Okay,
mean. Like you just, the ownership is on the government.
okay. So on that point, I would like to shed a light on another perspective as well. If we see like as you mentioned that it is almost impossible to do like achieve like any kind of big project or complete any kind of big project only by government agencies or like their involvement. But if we look at China, they have this agency, government agency that is like something aviation or something like which is like has just like come up with sixth gen fighter jet, and it is completely a government-based agency, and they have developed this technology. And even the US and the Europe, who has like privatized these like their Lockheed Martin in the US, which is developing, which is currently working on sixth gen, and they have not been able to come up with sixth gen fighter jets. And yet China and was able to do it. So I don't think it is like entirely a point of like privatizing and all of that. In my opinion, it is more about the government's like the willingness. to achieve things. Even in the either it is privatized or a government like. But I think it is more about the willingness to the develop and improve rather than being private or government. That is my point.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier about like how we're all human beings. It's not like somehow if you join a private company, your biological structure changes and you start becoming more efficient or something. It's not like that. It's just the internal structure of the organization sort of like maintains the dynamics of how a person behaves in that organization.
True, true.
So yeah, Jagroshan, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it's not the biological that changes, but one thing that I have observed is that a person who tried government exams and all and didn't get selected or get rejected, uh, when he or she ultimately went for, because of the age criteria and whatever, apply for private, they don't perform as per the, as much as another guy who from initially joined private was performing, because of the mentality issue and all of that. Because it's like for them it's their second chance, uh, second thing, it's like a backup plan that they had. But for other guy who joined initially, it's like their first plan. Okay, so that was my question, and the thing that I want to address here is, what your guys' perspective on privatization of what we are facing in India right now, education, especially schools. It's one hell of a problem, right? Because they are churning money like nothing else. And I think if somewhere if parents here in this discussion, like you guys can relate, right? I'm there is literally need of public sector, as we can see what Arvind Kejriwal has done in Delhi, that he come up with this model of training the teachers and all of it. Like he literally changed the face of the government schools. So I think here is one thing that I can see, that there's badly need of private bodies in the education, basically in the schooling system. Initially, the schooling system. I know we have IITs and all for higher education, but for schooling system, we know that how government schools work. There is government school, but the one thing that people love about government is the government job, not the government services like schools and telecom services and all. Nobody uses it, right? So I think, yeah, that this education part, the schooling part, there is need of. I'm kind of shifting this topic upside down by saying this, but I like to get your views on this. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think Abhishek had just joined. So
Yeah,
Abhishek, is this your first time joining these sessions?
yes, yeah. I
Okay,
have joined
so
this
let
for
me
first
let me
time and
explain.
also very
Go ahead.
sorry to join
I
a
have a
bit
question
late.
as well. One.
Yeah, Mukul,
Uh,
go ahead with the question, and then I'll offer like some context for Abhishek to participate, and then
yes.
we can take it forward.
Yeah, related to this only. Like,
Mm.
how long does it go? Like this thing?
Yeah,
For how
so
long time?
we'll okay. So let me explain the whole context, and I'll answer that as well. So Abhishek, Debate Club is
Mm.
basically like a platform for a public intellectual discourse, where we take a topic each week, and we have discussions on that. We call it the debate club, but basically these Saturday sessions are mostly open discussions, and we take a topic and we basically take a stance, and then take 5 minutes each to talk about these things, and then we go on the debate on the order of who raised their hand first. So it's a turn based discussion style kind of thing. And in terms of the times, like we join at 11 a.m. on Saturdays, and then we have a end of the moderated session at 12:30. So we're like 15 minutes away from the end of the moderated session. So these things are recorded, and we'll be posting it on YouTube. So
Oh,
you can see, you can go to our YouTube page and then see a list of all of our prior discussions. So at 12:30 we stop the recording, and we then have like a free open discussion. So there you can feel free, like it's not going to be posted, or it's just like you meet these four people in a room or something, and you were able to have a private conversation, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's
Got
the structure. And yeah, like I said, we have 15 more minutes of like moderated session. So if anybody has anything to say, you just raise your hand, and then you'll go in the order of like who raised the hand first, and you can take 5 minutes to speak, state your points.
Okay, got that. So, like, I would like to add my views on the question that was asked before your like if before your point, like Jagan, or who is that, like Jag Roshan. Yeah. So I would also like to add my views on the private schooling and overall thing. Like, since I'm living in Gurgaon, and I was born in a tier 2, tier 3 city at that time, and uh, at that time the fee that we used to pay and the fee that is currently private schools are charging in Gurgaon and Delhi, and full complete Delhi NCR is very high. I got to know, I am not married, but I got to know from my colleague that the average school fee, there are three different boards: CBSE, ICSC, and the other one is IPB, I guess, if I'm not, if I'm able to recall it correctly. So these three are the boards. CBSE, the average fee that I got to know is around 25,000, 25 to 30,000 per month for initial schooling, maybe first, second, third class, and it increases over the time, as year after the year. And similarly for ICSE, the average fee that I got to know is around 50 to 60K, and the last one, that IPB, that majorly focus on international curriculum. The fee is average fee is around 80 to 90K. So this is the scenario as of now. Like, I don't know what value they are offering, but I feel sometimes there should be some government uh, regulation on this. No, like this should be in two categories mainly. The one for the higher class, that those schools can charge as per their requirement, and as per their rules and regulation. But there should be some guidelines from the government or regulation from the government uh, to for these fees that usually government charge. And the second thing that I would like to like share my experience about private banks versus government bank. Like, I have couple of credit cards from private bank, and the service they offer is like very quick, and you can, like, when if you apply for credit card today, then you'll get your credit card by couple of days. And similarly, for like, once I have applied for SBI credit card, it took around 2 3 months to process and provide me my deliver my credit card. So these are the two experience and something that I had in my mind that I wanted to put. So that's it from my side.
Okay, thanks, Abhishek. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Say.
What's your opinion, Raghav, on this schooling thing that
So, to be honest, like my thoughts on education are like very, like I've been like dissatisfied with the education system for the over like since I was 12 years old or something. I'm 35 right now, and it's a lifelong passion for me to by the time I die, I want to change this whole thing. I actually have a nonprofit that runs like an education initiative where we are basically recrafting the entire education system, and we're building an alternative to this whole system so that like we accentuate various other things. Because like when I the reason why I talk a lot about like incentives and things like that, because like I have a background in neuroscience, and I've studied like how human motivation works and all these other things. And a lot of like the way that things fail and all that is because of a lack of proper insight into how you structure certain things. And education is one area where you're basically trying to optimize for um, like like somebody's memory retention and their ability to follow rules and be obedient. And that's what like translates to what people expect at jobs. Kids are basically like put into this system where they're well trained to be obedient employees, and that's how you're treated in a school. It is not really emphasizing um, like innovation or wisdom or applicability of their knowledge, all these things. So I think, I mean, from a perspective of this topic, I think that privatization of education is definitely um, something that is needed, because like that's where innovation can happen. And I, even though I'm an NGO, I will be like, it's a private entity, right? It's not a governmental entity, it's a private entity, even though it's a non-profit entity. So it I think that I think there has to be open play. Obviously, it is like that. And but at the same time, the government has to sort of step up and compete. So there has to be certain internal regulation that makes sure that government schools are as good as the private schools. Actually, if you look at most other countries, right, um, government schools are actually pretty good. It's not at the state of like extreme despair that Indian government schools are at. There is in Indian government schools, there is literally like it's like free for like it's like free for all kind of a situation, and the teachers come at their own time, and there is complete meaninglessness in what these kids are engaged at, and that is pretty much how it is in a lot of other places as well, not just in government schools, but government schools are a lot worse. So there has to be internal regulation that ensures that the government schools also are operating at standard. But that's my views on that. um Actually, my thoughts on this whole thing, right, the privatization and all this stuff is just that I think the government has to be as lean as possible, and it has to have like some kind of like a rating. Okay, there has to be a certain rating system that measures the efficacy of a certain government, and it cannot be just in terms of like GDP or this or that. It has to be like a comprehensive score that the government is taking responsibility for. So it will be a composite of like all these other things, and then when so throughout the term, like the political term, the score will be like upgraded, changed, and this has to be done by an independent organization, and this would be like a private think tank or something like that would do this. But obviously, I mean that again is the question, right? Like, so should we have it as a privatized thing, or should we have an entity that is doing it for the government? And there are these kind of think tanks already in place, right? They go and do these rank the various governments in various factors throughout, and it's just that a lot of them are not as, they all look at things from a Western perspective. So we need to have like a private think tank that understands the dynamics of this country and rates accordingly, like ranks these things accordingly and with proper data and insights. If we can do that and have that be held to a certain standard, then the government has to basically respond to the responses of this core rating system, and it'll be completely transparent, so everybody can see the rationale behind why it was done, so that there is no corruption within the private agency that does this rating. And if you can do that, then the government has to make sure that it's lean, it's running operationally efficiently, and it's the money that is coming in. Basically, the taxpayers are the funders of this whole operation, so they have to have like clear insights as to like how the money is being spent, and the scoring of the rating of the government comes as a fact of like measuring, like looking at this data and like looking at the overall efficiency in organization. And if the government has the ownership of like making sure that they are doing everything well, If not, then there is like penalty placed on the party that is running the government. So things like that, if that is done, right, if the incentive structure is like the wired in properly, even the government is going to start running efficiently, just as efficiently as a private organization. It's because there is no proper oversight, because the government is the highest authority, so it's like a monopoly, and they don't have any. So the opposition party is supposed to like do that, but that's where the failing also happens. That there is no proper system of like organizing this dialogue. And that's where, when a private think tank like does this kind of a system, then it makes it easy for us to have a clear dialogue between the opposition party and the ruling party, and having a very clear definition of what is progress, what is good governance, and what is bad governance. Then we will have the same level of efficiency in the government organizations as well. So if you bring this level of efficiency, and then you make sure that people are government is lean, then you have like the best of both worlds, because in the private sector, security is cannot be guaranteed. So suddenly, if your company is like going down, all of the employees could be fired. But obviously you cannot do that in the government sector, because if you fire all of them, then it can change the entire nature of the government, and government is something that you cannot replace. So anyway, I think that's just like thoughts off the top of my head. Because I think that it does happen like that when you have a change in political party, right, where the government changes, and the dynamics of things change, but still we manage to put up with that, even though it does bring in certain instabilities, and potentially it could be for the worse as well. But anyway, it was just like some thoughts that I had. I think honestly we can get started with the unmoderated session, so I'm going to stop the recording now, and we can have a free discussion.